Hi, I'm Gregory Rowe from Boise, Idaho, and I'm a natural resource pilot for Hawaii Air Research. My role is really to safely fly the biologists around to help them gather the data.
We are here conducting an annual aerial infrared elk survey to help assess populations of elk here in Pennsylvania.
The Game Commission estimates our elk population for a number of different reasons. The first and foremost, the primary reason, would be that serves as the foundation of all our other activities. So the habitat management, the hunting seasons, all of that centers around the number of animals that are out there on the landscape. We don't need to know exactly how many there are, right? We don't need to know it down to the single individual, but we need to have some sense of how many animals are out there and then how that changes through time.
The furthest east is Pennsylvania. It's also taken us up above the Arctic Circle to help survey up in the oil fields near Dead Horse, Alaska.
This is a really neat project coming from the Intermountain West. It's a totally different ecosystem than we normally work in, which presents its own realm of challenges and adventures.
A lot of the eastern United States is that deciduous tree cover, particularly in the north central part of the state where we have elk.
The biologists need to be able to see through the tree canopy, and so that's why this survey is done in the wintertime. And because it's done in the wintertime, it brings a challenge of flying when the weather's clear, and we deal with the weather almost on a day-by-day basis.
And then on top of that, the terrain makes it somewhat challenging, right? It's not flat and that kind of flat open landscape that a lot of the western United States is. We've got a natural topography here that has to be overcome, and again, you can get up and over top of that when you're in an aerial platform.
Because we're surveying from the sky, we can survey a lot of area in a little amount of time, and we can also see places that you can't see from the road. So it's much more accurate, much more cost efficient, and much more ecologically friendly for the elk as well, because they aren't bothered by airplanes.
We're not alone in using an aerial survey to estimate our elk population. A lot of other wildlife agencies use those as well, particularly in the western United States. It's fairly common. Not so much in the eastern U.S., but it is growing, and it's a more common method that's being used in the eastern United States.
Typically, we average about 10,000 acres an hour of survey from over 2,000 feet above the ground. So it's really non-invasive for the wildlife, and 10,000 acres an hour is a lot of land. Out here, we've actually been averaging closer to 13,000 acres, which is even more efficient.
So our elk population occupies the north central part of the state, and the area where they currently are is roughly 1 million acres. It's about 950,000 acres. When you're in an aircraft, you can access a lot more of that, and quickly too, right? So you can go from point to point without having to be constricted to the road network. The aerial survey that the Pennsylvania Game Commission uses now is definitely a vast improvement from a ground-based survey that we were using in the past. So the ground-based survey is really a minimum count or a minimum number of animals that are out there on the landscape. When we're doing the aerial survey, it's a true estimate. So we use the radio-collared animals as basically marks throughout the population, so we know where those radio-collared animals are. We know that there's other elk with them. And then we use the proportion of the radio collars that the aircraft sees versus the ones that they don't see, and that gets forced through a mark recapture formula to generate a true estimate. So it's definitely more accurate. It does come with some variability, but it's still a vast improvement from the ground-based survey that we were traditionally using. They pick up all kinds of different species out there, but it's pretty easy to distinguish and identify what animals are what, and elk are obviously a lot larger than any of the other species that they come across. We don't do an aerial survey for deer because of scale. So huge differences in the landscape that elk cover. It's about 1 million acres combined, and deer is the entire state. Elk are large. They generally live in large groups. They're gregarious animals, so they are herding species, and that makes them easier to count in general.
We're flying the Partnavia P-68 Observer 2. It is an Italian-made airplane that is specifically designed for aerial observation. It's used largely in Europe by a lot of law enforcement agencies, and here in the United States there are a few of them, and a lot of them are operated by state or government wildlife departments. You can sit with the pilot and observer in the front of the airplane, for visual observations. What makes it really unique is the plexiglass front canopy that's much more similar to a helicopter. And then the other thing that's really unique about the Partnavia is the belly door, like a bomb bay door that opens up, and that's produced by the Partnavia factory, comes with the airplane. And the Westcam MX-10 camera that we installed deploys out of the belly of the airplane for the survey.
The camera that they use to do the survey, right? So there's one person flying the plane, and that individual is literally just focused on flying the plane. There's a second individual in the back of the plane, and they are operating a very sophisticated camera that hangs off the belly of the aircraft. It's infrared, so it sees heat. It's a thermal camera. A lot of the flying is done at night. And what's really interesting is she can still distinguish between cows and bulls. There's no heat to the bull's antlers at this time of year. All of the velvet has come off and they're a hardened antler in January, February. But when those animals turn in a certain way, it actually casts a shadow across the heat of their body. And so it's really interesting, but from the air, 2,500 feet in the air, you can still see which animals are bulls because of antlers and then which ones are cows because they don't have antlers. Overall, the aerial survey is definitely an efficient method of estimating our elk population. They can cover a large amount of area in a relatively short amount of time. And again, we're using those radio collars to the best of our ability to estimate the population because of a known proportion of marked animals that are out there.